I also was reading recently, just rereading Durga Mata's book about the Divine Trilogy. It's about her life and Master and Rajasi, Janakananda, and what happened for her as a disciple coming, living with Master, and then Rajasi comes on the scene, and then she ends up taking care of him. And it was interesting to me to note that in all of this time, she just was a worker. She had realization for sure. Anyone that close to Master, when she came, he looked at her and he said, Ma Durga, because that was a name that he had called her in previous incarnation in India. And so he named her immediately. He didn't know her at all, but there she was. And then as things evolved, she did a lot of hard labor work for him, building a house car and a new bed and, you know, all these things. And when the time came and Master met Rajasi, Janakananda, in 1932 in Kansas City, Missouri. Was it? It wasn't St. Louis, yeah, Kansas City. Anyway, when he met him, then it was 1932, was the depression in this country. The work was barely surviving. Master had managed to, in just a few years of being in America, buy Mount Washington and move his work there and all of that. But things were very tough, and financially, but just in all ways, it was a very difficult time. Rajasi came on the scene, and then soon after that, being a very successful businessman, multimillionaire in Kansas City, he started donating and helping things happen. The magazine got printed again and all of that. But things really sped up at that point because Master, he didn't have a whole lot of time, you know, in his whole lifetime and being here in America. And so he had already gone through like 15 years by the time that he went back to India. And Rajasi not only did finance that trip, but that trip I hadn't remembered. And Durga Mata's book is interesting. It's not well written, and it's kind of like, who's doing what to who at certain points, and you know, not an easy flow that way, but there is a lot of information in that book. Anyway, but then I hadn't just fully realized how important that trip was to Master, because that was how he was going to write the Autobiography of a Yogi. Because at that point, he makes a comment, he said, I've got to see my guru. I don't even know what his birthday is. Yeah, and he'll never write it down, you know. And so he was going back to India to gather all of the information for the Autobiography of a Yogi, which he knew, he said, that book, and he didn't call it that at that time, but he said, writing this will be the foundation of the work in America. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, so he was gathering from all over. He had started writing already, even in the early 30s, that book. But then when he went to India, it really sped up. So Rajasi financed that, which was a round the world trip, and then, or back to India and back again. And then they also built Encinitas, bought the property, built the entire thing, while Master was away in India, which was multi-million-dollar project, but again, with a purpose. He wanted Rajasi, his chief disciple, to have a place to come for, rather than going to Florida, you know, that's where wealthy people went in the 30s and 40s and whatever. He wanted him to come to California, so he had this beautiful property bought on the cliff there and built and all of that, and managed to make it pretty much of a surprise to Master. Master had looked at that property for a number of years, actually, that specific property, and kept saying to Durga, now be sure to mention to St. Lin that I want him to buy that property. Have him go and look at it and make sure that he knows about it. And she said, yeah, maybe. You know, she just had to be very evasive with him. So anyway, but that happened. And so financially, Rajasi was giving a tremendous amount and really got the work established financially. And the thing that, for me, being involved with estate planning to Ananda, is that that word endow, endowment, endow appears regularly in her writings about Rajasi, because she was taking care of him. And when he would come to visit, she did everything for him as a fellow disciple, not as a servant. And she was well placed in doing that. But at any rate, so that ability for the work to be endowed was vital, because Master was moving like Swami Kriyananda moved in building Ananda, except probably faster. Just spread all over and building things and getting things established and having centers all over the United States. But he really, he was spending a lot as he did all of that too. So, but he had to go back, and he knew always there had to be an endowment and then money to spend. An endowment and money to spend. So, you know, we're right on track for all of that, by the way. We're building the endowment, money to spend is our fundraising efforts. But at any rate, then moving forward, Rajasi did endow Encinitas. He gave $1 million in stocks and life insurance, over $1 million. And I think probably the total amounts were like, I don't know, $3 or $4 or $5 million that he ended up giving to SRF over a number of years, which allowed them to really be established. But in that time, so we come forward to Rajasi doing all of that, and then Master leaves his body. And it was such a, just reading, I just read it straight through, because she really, Durga really talks about all of that. And when Master left, he had been saying, yes, and I'm talking about this because in 2 days we have the anniversary of Master's Mahasamadhi. And so when he left, although he had been talking about it, it was a shock to everyone. I mean, Master was the work. It was him. And I mean, he was an avatar. So the amount of energy and the ability to work with people and his spiritual power and all of that, gone. And it's interesting, because when we're talking about dogmatism and common sense, I was thinking, you know, in that room, Swami Kriyananda was there when Master left his body at the Biltmore. In that room, probably he and only a few other people understood what had just happened. Dick Hames, who he was sitting next to, a well-known singer, said, "Oh, Master fainted." And Swami said, no, Master would not faint in the middle, you know, I mean, he was in the middle of an event. And anyway, but he had a heart attack. And he had warned them. He said, oh yes, a heart attack is the easiest way to go. That's how I choose to go. Poof, instant. And so there it was. And interestingly, Rajasi and Durga Mata were not there. They were in Encinitas, and they were going to come after the big event with the Consul General and Master having to give a lot of energy to those people that were there, and they would come after. Because Durga had said, we should go and see Master now. And Rajasi said, no, let's wait. And so anyway, they missed. I mean, Master was always in telephone contact, and he was in contact with all the close disciples and people that he needed to be in contact with. At any rate, then that happened, and they were all in shock, including Rajasi, and then soon after that, and they weren't sure right away if he had really left his body completely. Because samadhi, breathless, can look like that as well. And so they were doing the Om in the ear, and there was a special mantra that Master had given to them, Durga and a few others who were close to him, and they finally said, no, it's final, he's gone. And that was just such a complete blow to them. But that was, and again, keeping in mind what happens in life and in the spiritual life, is that really, right at that same time, Rajasi had brain cancer. Yeah, and it was starting to show, and Durga was starting to notice that, wow, there's something wrong here. There was effects starting to happen. And, but, you think, well, wait a minute, Divine Mother. I mean, Master's done this work for you, and now his chief disciple, who also just became president, is sick, really sick. And but that's just what it looked like. That was the karma of Master, and the karma right before that, a few months before Master, Durga Mata left her body, very, very close to Master. A few months after, Rajasi is diagnosed with brain tumor and has an immediate operation, just immediate. It's like, whoa, he's going to leave his body if we don't do this. And the reason I'm saying all of this is that just to keep in mind how things can unfold, and they may seem like this isn't right, but it was the karma of that time and of the people involved. And yet Rajasi, right in that time, because he was always he was slow in making decisions, but when he did, then he moved the energy. Well, he hadn't yet given the rest of the money to SRF. He hadn't yet completed, and it's not just giving the money, that was not a good way to put it. He hadn't completed his dharma with supporting Master's work in this time. And so he was diagnosed in 1952, he passed in early 1955, and during that time he had 3 operations. But again, it just looks like, oh, this poor man, he's got brain cancer, and we're doing these operations one after the other. But he was having incredible visions of Master. So just to say what it looks like on the other side, one of his visions was around probably 1953 on Master's birthday, when he had a vision of Master in the astral world. Probably more than astral, but at any rate, that's how he described it. And Master was just full of energy and joy, and Babaji was there on a throne, and the whole hall was like a palace. He said, like the palace that Babaji created for Lahiri, it looked like that. He said it was beautiful with people, and he was there, Rajasi was there, and Master walked by, and he was in these beautiful robes and just full of joy and greeting everybody. And the only sad part was, he said, but Master didn't come and greet me. It was interesting. He just mentions that. But at any rate, that's what it looked like on the other side of things. Master drops dead, but not really. Actually, he's on the other side, very busy. And Rajasi had many visions of Master, of Babaji, of Sri Yukteswar, of all the gurus, and just that showing their love for him and for the disciples, and just showing Master just continued to be as busy as he was in this world, in the other, serving and helping people and going, one day Durga Mata said, where is Master right now? And he said, oh, he's in India doing something. I don't know what. He's in India doing something. So he was just all over working the same. So again, I think also for all of us, that heightened, expanded awareness of what's really happening spiritually. You may not have visions, but more is going on. And do keep that in mind. It's really important to have that expanded awareness, and to remember that it's not just, oh, the material plane, here we are sitting here in chairs and, this is it. It's not it at all. And the path that we're on is trying to help us prove to ourselves that truth, that awareness, that expansion.